Welcome, everybody. My name's Atif Chowdhury. I'm really excited to be joining you in this session for a celebration for 2024 of Neurodiversity Celebration Week. I hope to some of you guys, you know the work that I get to do and what an honor it is for me to do that. But if I'm new to you, I will sort of tell a little bit of an introduction as best I can, and just to say welcome, really. So my name's Atif Chowdhury. I am one of the founders and the CEO of an organization called Diversity and Ability, or DNA, as it's sometimes called. A lot of our work is transformative, supporting people in education, accessing higher education, as well as in the workplace. And we work with folks around the world, including the Commonwealth of Learning and at times the United Nations, as well as other communities that are really struggling to be part of these conversations. I have a particular interest myself in the conversation about neurodiversity in terms of restorative justice, that there are so many stories that we are not going to hear from, perhaps never will in this lifetime. And there's so much at stake when so many people are struggling to participate and tell their stories. I am a big fan, I guess, of the idea that we build neurodiversity conversations in inclusive ways. Of course, I'm sure everybody listening would feel the same way. But I am adamant that too much of the conversation is steered in a Eurocentric way that doesn't lend its thoughts or feelings towards people coming from communities in the global South that have much to look at how neurodiversity lends itself in acceptance from different areas. And of course, the different nuances that the global majority voices have that are very much not yet in these spaces. And it can be because of shame, it can be because of communities, and it can be because of the way that perhaps neurodiversity is industrialized at the moment or capitalized in a particular way. But it may also be because we just have a deep-seated absence, if not a structural barrier, if not perhaps a historical racist one, where we've not cared enough about different cultures and communities and how they navigate neurodiversity. And this deeply hurts communities where they're not necessarily invited to participate on the terms in which they come and show up in or feel safe in, but rather the terms in which they have to continue masking by any other means, even within a neurodiversity context or label. So this is a powerful provocation, and I think that we can dig deep and have the courage in our hearts and ourselves to do this. If not for ourselves, then the responsibility we have for a nation and nations who aren't represented, and for people not yet born, who recognize that this isn't just about intersectional struggles, but it's also about justice. And that part of this struggle is going to be an intergenerational one. That perhaps we won't achieve the equity in this conversation for people of color, or for women, or for transgender, or for LGBTQ+, or for anybody just marginalized, because that lack of representation is still very much there. But at the same time, we can be part of something that says we will be good ancestors. We will make it so that a generation after us just has it easier. And we will normalize that neurodiversity is a global conversation with a global reach. And it's not just about ensuring that people with labels are the only ones who participate, providing they're willing to acquiesce to a design within Eurocentric understandings of what those labels are. I hope I'm not vague on that or unclear, so please use the space to interrogate that and ask whatever questions you need to get the clarity that you deserve and need. I hope you look at the good work that's happening across the world on these conversations. And there's so many people taking part in Neurodiversity Celebration Week, because it very much is that, a celebration. But no celebration can be true to itself or its aspirations if it chooses to celebrate but doesn't recognize who is getting left behind. That this is a conversation about culture and about communities. Those are in it, those are accepted for it, those are welcomed, and those who historically aren't hard to reach but have been easy to ignore. And class plays every role in that, because this isn't just about color. This is about who has voice and agency and what traumas are played in those lives to prevent that. But I really want to not reinforce despair. So I'm also going to say this, that there are incredible innovations in the world that have always come from differences, that people in the world can bring invention and innovations in space through lived experiences, that we can be this good, if not this great in the world, not despite the barriers we face, but sometimes through them and because of them. And that's usually because we've championed ourselves, or we've met other people's kindness who's helped us champion those differences and those innovations. So I'm really excited on that conversation. I'm really excited to have my guests here, who are all champions in my life, all people I am very much excited to be with in this space with you. I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves, but I just want you to take it from me that, as we said in this conversation, this is going to be spicy, you know, and we're not afraid. And what we have here is not just our conversations about our own lived experiences and the challenges that they may have come with, but also the ambition and the invitation we have to the rest of the world that says this neurodiversity means you too. You know, we're all neurodiverse, all of us. Our human experiences, how we are loved, whether we regularly got to access food and resources, whether we felt mentally supported in times of change. We are all neurodiverse. It'd be a shame if we weren't, you know, because it's beautiful. We're all neurodiverse, but we're not all marginalized because of it. And that's the work to do. And that's the sense of justice. And that's the participation, I think, that diversity and ability and so many others, including my colleagues on this chat, are building on. So I'm going to take a breath and say thank you for joining me on this chat as we go through the next hour and a half. And I'm going to make sure that we take time to ask questions of each other and also visit your own questions as you type them in the question and answer section. So please do feel able to use the chat and to use the question and answer sessions. I will be keeping an eye on it as best I can. And we have about 1,500 people in this participating so far, and I suspect more will come as we join. So I'm going to pause there and invite my colleagues to share a little bit, if not a lot, as much as they feel really, about their stories, their sense of purpose, and their feeling about this actual talk about culture, community, and class in neurodiversity. Who does get left behind? So if I may go first, I would like to start with Eva, if I may.
Thanks, Atif. Hi, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. My name's Eva Echo. My pronouns are she, they. I am an out and proud trans woman of East Asian origin. I am Director of Innovation here at Birmingham Pride in the UK. I'm also one of the directors at Trans in the City, which is the world's largest organisation for trans and non-binary people in business. And I also sit on the Crown Prosecution Service's hate crime panel. And I guess I'm one of the people who have struggled with neurodiversity. I'm late to the party, as you can probably say. I'm still waiting to try and get a diagnosis. So I am one of those people that's effectively been left behind. I'm being kind of late on in life trying to get a diagnosis. I have looked back on my life and I've realized I've struggled so much. And in the past, I used to just think I was quirky. I did things differently, that people couldn't see the real me because I was a bit of an outcast and, everyone left me to it. But as I've really journeyed, especially on my medical transition as well, I've learned a lot about myself, the way I see the world. And, upon learning the statistic that trans people there's a lot higher chance of autism. It made me think and it made me question my actions a lot more, which has kind of led me down the route to this. But along the way, I faced a lot of medical gatekeeping, not just for my transition, but also trying to access medical healthcare in other areas as well. And I'd love to bring some of that to today's webinar.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you. Hannah.
Hey everyone, it's really good to be here amongst these fantastic humans as well. I'm feeling really blessed today. So I'm Hannah Litt. I work in all the things Arthur said. So, DEI, anti-racism, but also for me, it's about looking at liberation. So making sure that actually who has been left behind and why, looking at the intersectional experience is really, really important for me. Bit like you, Eva, I was late to the party. I only got my diagnosis last year. It was actually I got my diagnosis, but I then realised I also had OCD. But actually, just looking at the process that I had to go through with the medical gatekeeping, I decided actually, do you know what? I'm going to take ownership of. I know who I am, and I'm not going to go through the diagnosis process because it was actually quite a traumatic experience. So this conversation is really, really important to me from an intersectional perspective to see actually who does get left behind, because it can be really difficult because when you look at it from a systemic point of view, it's a lot. So thanks for having me.
Very welcome, Hannah. It's a privilege to have you. Pavin, you.
Hello, thank you so much for the introduction, Atif, and I'm so pleased to be here because I think I was just telling before I was joining the call that I was trying to remember when I started speaking about neurodiversity and where I stand with it, and it was 1 year ago. I was on this call that you organized, and I saw you speak and was inspired to actually add to the conversation because I felt like actually you can look like myself and still speak about neurodiversity and also I think there is liberation in talking about who you are and what you are. So yeah, so my name is Praveen Kolaguri, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm a brown person with beard, dark beard, and slightly long curly hair. And so my day job is I work as a mobile propositions manager within BT, but I also head up the ERG there, which is the Able2 network, which looks after the voices of disabled, which includes neurodivergent people as well. And I'm a trade union representative. I'm a human rights activist, as with all people who are neurodivergent. I'm sure like we have our fingers in lots of pies. So yeah, so that's me. I think I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think this conversation is really important to understand why our system currently doesn't work for a lot of people, right? Like, I mean, this is celebration week, but I think we also need to understand and question the system that which we are in, which doesn't work for women, which doesn't work for LGBTQ plus people, which doesn't work for global majority. So who is it working for, and who is it serving? I think I will try and discuss, bring that aspect into the conversation today. So really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you all. I must say, I think you've all been very modest in your introductions, and I think that's testimony to who you are as people. But I'm just going to reinforce that you're all three people that I personally and my team at Diversity think very highly of. And we don't just add that list easily. And so, in terms of representation of voices that we don't hear enough of, and in terms of giving credence and justice to that, the three of you are here for that and then some. And you resonate that long before I've met you. So I'm excited as well. So I'm just going to punctuate that. And I hope the audience has a chance to look you all up as well and see your work and I guess connect to it as it feels just and to amplify it where needed. And so there's so much in this. This conversation as well, I'm just going to say is that for some folks, it may be challenging. It might be because I find some things conversationally challenging because it makes me feel warm. I know it sounds odd, but I'm just going to put that out there. That there are moments you can have in your life where you didn't know you were in pain until you felt something that brought you closer to feeling protected. And that can actually be unsettling, but it can also feel like you've got a hug from somebody invisible, you know? And it's a good thing, but it can also be emotionally, I guess, at times challenging. So I'm going to put that out there, that there will be us giving you all a hug from wherever we are to you to say you're welcome. and that this isn't an imposition of your version of neurodiversity being more legitimate than somebody else's, but rather an invitation to say, however you show up in this, with or without a diagnosis, with or without a protection of one, that you're welcome here and that you matter here. And even if you reject the notions of diagnosis and what they are and what they're not in the world, the fact that you can celebrate that we think differently and should feel welcomed every time we do is enough, you know? So I will say that, absolutely. I am going to touch on, as we discuss this work, perhaps, and I'm just sure we all will be thinking about this in the context of anti-racism as well. I think it is an honor and a privilege to be able to have these conversations in spaces, often in spaces that are really welcoming of that, but sometimes not. In some spaces where there's a knee-jerk, almost a defensive posture to try and control that narrative, or at least to do a lot of public relations on it. And I think that is okay, it's understandable, but I think we're not here to demonize anybody or organizations, but rather to recognize there is some folks committed to this struggle and really doing it well. And there are others who I think there's posturing, perhaps, you know, and performative behaviors. There are questions that will come up in the chat, I'm sure, if they've already seen one or two, about neurodiversity and capitalism, which I think we'll probably investigate, or at least, you know, just thank the person for asking the question and let's just honor it back. So there are some things there that we can touch on. I'm going to use this time, I guess, to just ask the questions that we've got in our chat, but I really am grateful to the experience that we're going to have. And I will say, stress as well, that if people feel a bit dysregulated or challenged by some of it, it's okay. It's okay to go calmly, and it's okay to reach out and say, hey, I disagree. Or it's okay, just say, wow, thank you. Or just, wasn't that lovely? You know, people who felt like me, looked like me, spoke. I'm someone who gets to be a brown person from Bangladesh originally. I'm a child of a migrant who's traveled the world a lot, grew up in a working class white council estate, a very, very big one. Spent a long time hiding the things that I couldn't hide mentally. It was hard to hide that I was a different skin color to my peers. It was hard to hide I had a name that people struggled to announce, even though there's only one syllable in it. And there was mostly just a struggle just to be somewhere and feel safe. The one thing that I wouldn't have been able to talk about was the idea that learning differently for me was a challenge, because most of my childhood I felt I wasn't bright. I carried that deeply with this fear that others were feeling it and seeing it all at the same time. So then seeing the idea of the conversation of dyslexia or ADHD, particularly dyslexia, was something that I wasn't aware of. And then when I did see it, I saw it in faces of essentially white people. Richard Branson was a great example, perhaps, or a bad example in some ways. But what I didn't see was people who looked like me. I didn't see anybody being celebrated anywhere. To be honest, it wasn't just about dyslexia or neurodiversity. To be honest, it was about just being on top of the pops. It was just about being, I'm showing my age here, but just having folks who look like us being on television as actors rather than just hard luck stories and problems. And so for that reason, I strongly felt that we have a responsibility to show up in that way. And I'm going to say it again and stop on this, is that the more we do that, the more we open doors for others who are looking for voices that look like us. It's not enough just to say, so-and-so's got it, and so it's the same as you. I once jokingly said that about Richard Branson, that people sometimes think I'm entrepreneurial. I'm not so sure about that. But we're both dyslexic. I understand that. But I always said is if we both scored exactly the same on the RIT scoring for dyslexia, myself and Richard Branson had the same scoring as dyslexic social enterprise innovators or whatever. The only thing I have in common with Richard Branson is still a beard. You know, it's nothing else. Our lives are completely different. Our experiences are different. Our sense of fear in childhood and what that means and how we tell that story will always be different. And that's the same for all of you listening. So it brings me to the question, which is, is there a collective experience? Is there a collective experience that we share? Are we a neuro tribe? Are we the neurodivergence that we get to say we are and others are not? Perhaps, I'm not sure. So I'm going to ask the question, Hannah, to you first, if that's okay. Is there, to your mind, a neurodiverse experience, or even a neurodivergent one?
I would say there is an experience, but is there a collective experience? There will be things that overlap, but no, everyone's experience is it's their own, right? We're all intersectional human beings. Sorry, looking at I also know that I've got a diagnosis here, and that in itself is a privilege. Not everyone has the privilege of even having a diagnosis. So I think there is an experience that occurs, and I think it will overlap, but actually looking at how that is intersectional. So talking about my diagnosis with ADHD, like I said, I was late to the party, but it was a really awful experience. And considering in the end, I went private and all that stuff, I just wasn't believed. And that was because of systemic racism in the medical, with medical inequities. We know that exists. So I don't think there is one experience, but I think what we do have is a lot of spaces, like you said, Atif, when I kind of, the penny dropped and I thought, hey, hold on a minute, I might have ADHD. I was like, okay, how do I navigate this? And I went out there and I could not find a space. So I would go into spaces, but I'd actually find them quite harmful. So I'd come out of them. So there was no representation out there about somebody who could guide me along the journey. In anything that is kind of collective, like actually, this is how you navigate this. This is what you have to do. This is how it's going to work. There was nobody there that looked like me. So kind of when I went through the diagnosis, I very much said that actually my experience is not going to be the same as anybody else's, but I have to show up. I have to be visible. I have to speak, and I have to talk about how hard this is, because everywhere I looked, it was just, you've got ADHD, you're a superhero. And I thought, I don't really feel like a superhero right now. I feel depleted. I feel gaslit. I feel, I've got hidden disabilities, which a lot of them have. I've got them because I've been masking for so long. And eventually, autoimmune diseases are really prominent in women of the global majority, because, we're really good at masking. But also, if we look at the experiences, for me, it wasn't just kind of going out and looking at, where I'm going to access support, what do I do? What does this mean? Like, you have this whole period of time where you're like, oh my God, what would my life had been? Would I had the support? Would I have, like you, if I was really, sorry, I think you said it as well, but I was awful at school. Like I was, but I was a good person, right? But I really, really struggled. So it made me kind of think, what would life have been like for me had I had that support? But then also there's this also about, I've done all right, I'm doing okay, but it's been tough. So being able to just kind of navigate that space and process that space while having, knowing that actually a lot of the ailments and illnesses that you have are because you've masked for so long and people haven't seen you. It's a real process. So no, it's not but then we need to look at things like socioeconomic groups, look at our prison population. There's a really high percentage of people that are in our in our criminal justice system, but also that also have addiction. But if we start looking at the percentage of people, less than 1% of any other racial background have access addiction services, get access to addiction services, or are accessing. So there's not, when you're talking about kind of experience, when you have people from, I'm going to say the global majority for now, but even in my own community, it's not really, it's this huge stigma. It's a whole taboo. We have a lot of people that still don't kind of have their head around it. So again, it's kind of what you said, Arthur, it's a very Eurocentric approach. But when we are from the global South, trying to explain, I think my dad said to me, is there a course you can do to get to fix this? So because it wasn't coming from a place of nastiness, it's just a real lack of understanding. So I think everyone has an experience, but I think there's also something in validating those who don't. We know ourselves, and there's a huge piece of kind of gaslighting when it comes to just, thinking differently. So I think there is something about, people just taking ownership. And if I say that's who I am, just accept it, and I know, and help me figure it out. So I think there's a lot we can do to really make experiences better. Although nobody has the same experience, there is no reason why empathy and support can't be put in place.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for the depth of that very much, and to raise the issue of prisons and what that means. And that probably will highlight and emphasize that question again for those listening. So Pavleen, I'm going to ask you is there a neurodiverse experience? And I guess I'm throwing this back to conversations might say neurodivergent or neurodiverse. I can play with
Yeah. I mean, I don't like people policing language as well sometimes as well, because I think everyone knows what we're talking about. So if you're saying neurodiverse and neurodivergence or anything else you want to say, please do feel free to say so. I think I know the question is to talk about the unique experiences of neurodivergent people in different cultural contexts, because I think divergence from anything that deviates from normal depend and how it is dealt by the society depends on the context of where that person is and who that person is. So it could be race, class, and age, and also cultures. And also we need to understand that labels can be liberating, but in some places of the world it can be limiting, dangerous. It can mean that you could be incarcerated, because my first experience of actually seeing someone who is neurodivergent comes from like when very young age, where I went to a temple in South India, and at the cellar of it, I did walk through for some. I think I was playing, and I just didn't ended up in an area where I was not supposed to be, and I saw a lot hordes of people tied to walls, and there were people who were being religiously cured from whatever they were having. I think it could be mental health condition or neurodivergence in a way. So yeah, I think there are divergent people in all cultures and all societies, and I think how they are supported and their value in society is dictated by the wider culture. I think currently, globally, anyways, I think the neoliberalist capitalism is the dominant economic and cultural system which uh, prioritizes profit. So it looks at a person and thinks that, hey, like, I mean, if I give a certain kind of person some privileges, would it profit the system? If yes is the answer, then I think you are given your accommodations. But if I'm a neurodivergent person and I cannot contribute economically uh, in the current society, I don't think I'll be granted any accommodations. I will be locked up for my divergence, which Hannah kindly suggested. How impulsivity is dealt with depends on your social background, on your color, and your race as well. So it ends up showing, like, I mean, why more people who are black and brown end up in prisons, and you know that more people, I think a large majority of them are neurodivergent folks. So these people who cannot contribute to the society in a way that is deemed profitable are incarcerated. And I think there is a lot of conversations which are happening in Europe that are advanced around neurodiversity, particularly around the sensory experiences that we have. I believe that there is some research that backs that up, that needs to be taken into a different context and understood. Uh, I I think the advances that we have seen in Europe need to be taken into other cultures and see what they mean. But I also feel like we should call out the lack of support in some certain cultures where it is where we are punished for not being the norm in a way. So yeah, I'll stop there, but thank you.
Owen, thank you. There's lots to draw on there as well. I mean, the confidence to even touch on something as delicate as religion as well, is an intersectional truth as well as to how people address identity, belonging, and his shame. You know, thank you for talking about that as well and sharing that. So Eva, for you, shall I repeat the question, or are you comfortable?
No, I'm good, thanks. I mean, when we look at the human experience, we are all individual. We're all our own kind of beautiful. And so I don't think there is a specific experience. As Hannah touched on, it's a struggle. It's a real struggle, even after diagnosis, after, you know, as I've spoken to some people who have been diagnosed. So that experience is struggle. There are overlaps between people based on their intersectionality, their lived experience. But there's a lot of gatekeeping, and that comes from many aspects of life. Medical gatekeeping. One of the questions asked what that was, and that was it's basically medical professionals finding excuses, finding reasons to hold you back. For me personally, I tried to seek a diagnosis or at least get on a waiting list, and I was told by my GP that I don't need one. I'd effectively got this far in life, and I seem to be thriving. But am I? On the outside, I may be, you know, quite successful doing this and that and the other. Like having my fingers in so many pies, as Parvi mentioned, and that's just what we do. But does that mean I'm really thriving? And when I really tried to push back against my doctor's opinion of this, he basically said, well, you're trans. A lot of your struggles are rooted within your transness. And I'm thinking, no. But no matter how much I pushed back and said, well, you're not in a place to really make that decision for me. And if I choose to, you know, if I want a diagnosis, you really need to be pushing and putting me forward for a referral. There was a real reluctance, and I came away with no referral. I'm at the point where I'm considering going private, and I shouldn't have to, and that plays into, you know, the capitalist aspects of things. But there are a lot of overlaps with, for example, when I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria. When I had my diagnosis, it's almost like a badge. People believe you. Your experience is suddenly less of a struggle because you have a piece of paper. And it's like that paper gives you validation. But way before I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, I've known since I was about the age of 4 or 5. I don't need a piece of paper. I don't need a clinician, psychologist to tell me how trans I am. I'm trans as hell. And when we look at neurodiversity, I didn't know it then because I didn't know what masking was until, you know, about a year ago. So I guess, you know, I was masking really well. But now that I'm starting to break things down, I'm starting to ask questions of myself, I'm starting to research things. I'm finding that, yeah, when you don't have a diagnosis, it's almost like people think you've just had half an hour on Google. You know, you need to come away from Google because it's not doing you any favors. But we access Google because we can't access a medical professional. We can't access an assessment in a timely manner. And so, yeah, that is a real struggle. And from a cultural point of view, looking back at my dad growing up, he was like autistic as hell. I mean, looking at some of his behaviors, but not knowing the language, it wasn't ever talked about, and things like that weren't ever talked about. And whenever they were mentioned, for example, I remember as a family, we were watching Rain Man, a classic film. And the stigma that came out from that, like there wasn't the language within the family, you know, within the household, within the community for those sorts of things. And Dustin Hoffman's character was labeled from a pretty negative point of view. And then there is that stigma that then is attached to that sort of behavior. And growing up, you know, there's a lot of internalized hate towards that. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be seen to be like that. I have to be as neurotypical as I can, or the feeling of, because I didn't know the language for it. But because culturally we don't talk about these things, everything, you only have to jump on Instagram now and you've got influencers talking about autism, talking about ADHD. They're all white. Majority of them are white. And I've taken so long to really talk about it. And it wasn't until about a year ago that I can openly say these words and talk about the feelings surrounding it, because I didn't see people, I didn't see representation. And it's amazing being part of this panel with absolutely stunning people, because I find community. I find that, we have a panel here made up of non-white people, and we're openly talking about this, and we are the representation that we never had. And that's why this conversation is so important, because we really need to be able to give space and to platform the experiences of those who aren't white.
Absolutely. So thank you. So I'm going to take us on a bit of a journey on this more, even further as well. I'm going to dig even deeper on this for folks, and just going to pause as well. The questions are coming up about the Eurocentrism and capitalism, and largely they are tied hand in hand to many extents. But we're going to touch on those things. But I want to touch on some of the things you've said as well. And it's been said in different ways here that a dear friend I got to know recently, she said something really beautiful, which I think I'm gonna give a big shout to Vic Mananza from Gain, who's just awesome. And Vic, they said something which I really stayed with me. It said a diagnosis is a place for a heart that's got nowhere else to go. And you got to sort of think on that, because it's not just that the diagnosis is liberating, because for many it deeply is. Outside of this work, and I encourage you guys to check it out. But to everybody listening, there's a podcast that we run at DNA called Labels and Legacies, and it's to highlight these conversations that labels can be deeply liberating for so many people fighting to be seen, or wishing to be seen, or wishing to belong or heal, or just to be safe. A label can be that shield. But for others, it's a source of shame, and of course, and it's been said, we kill shame when we find safe places to tell stories. And we're doing it now. We're making a safe place to tell a story. But at the same time, labels, when they are not designed from the voice of women, they're not designed in the voice of realities of people and the differences they come up. They're designed through Eurocentric ideas of what is a healthy, learned person. And you use a deficit model to do that. Essentially, we've created an anchor to say, this is normative behaviors. This is the social acceptance tied to those behaviors. And there's a deficit model. And in that deficit model, we hope you get through it, and we care a lot. So we're going to give you that label. We're not going to care so much where that label came from, or its auspices, or its original source of design. The autism itself, its foundations on it are no different today. Yes, they've changed the name, but essentially the model we use for autism is no different largely than the model used by Hans Asperger's. And what happened there in terms of Nazi eugenics and programs around what is it that is failing systems when blonde, blue-eyed, perfect boys are not complying with what we're asking. There must be an ailment. Rather than the idea that they just may be just a moral compass in children to say, I refuse to comply with this. I refuse to be accommodated into this system. And I think that again applies to so many things when dyslexia is measured not on anything other than learning isolation, how bad we're at something. We're not measuring our strengths of our imagination, how we articulate that. We're not measured through the spark in our eyes in our children that refuse to let that spark disappear, despite a barrage of learning isolation constantly visiting them every day. And we don't know what to do about those things. So we've created models. And like I said, labels are deeply liberating for many. But I strongly would argue that the current modeling of neurodiversity in a Eurocentric measurement is reinforcing elements of white supremacy to say this is what we accept people to be in the form in which we measure them. And this is the thing that we're going to create a model on to say that here's a reason why they're not more like us. This, I think, is really problematic, but I think a generation after us, and I said we are the good ancestors, say we'll do more with this. But I also am open to be really wrong on this. I'm totally open for people to say no. But I will say, as I said, labels are deeply liberating. The question is, if I think back to what Glickman said, a diagnosis is a place for a heart that's got nowhere else to go. So my question is, why has it got nowhere else to go? Not that it has nowhere else to go, but why? How did we end up here? How is it statistically, and I will warn you that this will be emotional for people, that the highest suicide rate in this country is Black men? Yeah, but same proportionally, people of color are more likely to find out about neurodiversity in challenging situations. It could be pupil referral units. It could be in prisons and custodial dynamics. These are intersectional truths that make it hard to kill shame and tell these stories. So I'm going to ask two questions, and I think I'm going to merge the questions together for you, and then I would like to take some of the Q&A as well. What are the benefits and limitations of the labels we wear? What approaches can be adopted to build connection and solidarity within the neurodiverse community for that reason? So if I can merge those two thoughts together, I'm going to throw this out again. I guess in the same order. Hannah, I think I'll just start with you, if I may.
Yeah, very cool. Kind of what you said. So for me, looking at the benefits and the limitations of the label, first of all, we need to look at why we have labels in the first place, just across the, like, how has that been designed? And actually, what are the labels? So for me, if we're going to look at my labels, ADHD, I've got a deficit, I'm obsessive, I'm compulsive. Like, are these the words that I actually want to be wearing? So who's put those labels in place and why are they there? I think, and we need to start looking at capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy culture, all of that kind of stuff. And then who do we need to be validated by? And what does it give us, right? So who, by having a diagnosis, I'm pretty sure anybody that goes to get a diagnosis pretty much knows that this is, because it's a process to go through, right? You do a lot of learning, you know who you are at that point. So who do we need to be validated for, right? And what does it actually give us? Does it give us access into spaces? I found that it didn't. So for me, it was a personal kind of validation. I needed to know that everything that people had said I had a reason. I needed to be validated. I needed to know. And actually, we need to look at what do we have to go through to get that as well? Is it beneficial? Is it, it was really not a good experience for me. I just wasn't believed. I wasn't supported. I had to fight. It still took me nearly 20 months to get, and I paid for mine, right? Because I wasn't believed and I had to go back and find somebody else. They were like, no, I don't believe you now. I had a GP who had my diagnosis in for a 17-page report and was like, I don't think so. Maybe go and see another doctor. So it was a really tough ride for me. So who am I asking to be validated? And then what do we get access to, right? I'm a Muslim woman, I'm South Asian, I'm brown, and I have hidden disabilities too, right? So what access? So just because I have a diagnosis, does it mean that my brownness is going to be let in? Does it mean that my Muslimness is going to be? Does it mean that it's going to be accessible for my disabilities? So I think it's really recognizing that, we have to be honest, that whiteness allows you access into spaces that actually a lot of us, well, all of us in this space may not get access to, whether we have a diagnosis or not. So I really was looking at, I was that point before I got to crisis point, and I was like, I need to figure out what this is because I'm not okay. And it's really just looking at the suicide rates and all of that kind of stuff, and who it's literally people could lose their lives because they're just not getting access, they're not getting validation. So for me, it was about, when I did get my diagnosis, I wore all of my labels. I've got it right here. There's a t-shirt for everything, by the way. I wore all of my labels, and I had not, it stopped becoming a choice for me. because of I said, I have to wear my labels, I have to speak, I have to be out there and I have to show people the reality of this for someone that looks like me, because if I don't do it, who comes after me? Because for me, I was desperately looking for a space where I could exist and get support, and it didn't exist for me. And it may exist, I just couldn't find it, but for whatever reason, I couldn't access it. So I had to then become that person and wear all of my labels inside my community and outside of my community. So it was a real big piece about me going in and saying, no, actually, do you know what? We can't just pray this away. Like there is, you know, we can't just, and how it links into then addiction. And you know, and if we have our faith leaders, for example, and they have someone with addiction and they are displaying, you know, neurodivergent traits, you can't just pray it away. So do you know what? I'm here, we're here. Can you just go, like, we can give them some, because they're not equipped either, and it doesn't come from a place of harm, but it causes harm. So for me, it was really just, I started looking and I was like, when does this start? So I became a governor of a school. And I saw the same thing. I saw, you know, who is in the pupil referral units, who are being excluded. And I was like, can we get that data by race? Can we get that by, you know, socioeconomic group? Can we, and let's have, and you know, Black and brown children were just naughty. There was no, and I could see how that played out for me in the workplace. Like, oh, no, it's so-and-so just being so-and-so. He's, you know, he was a white cis het man, but he could get away with, you know, having the impulsiveness or, you know, not being able to regulate emotions, but not me. I was angry. I was, you know, why are you so angry all the time? What's wrong with you? Have you got a problem? But I didn't get the grace. Who gets the grace? Because I couldn't code switch either. All that kind of stuff. We need to start looking about why we even have the labels and who's put them in place, for what reason, and what do they benefit? For me, the benefit of me owning my labels is purely for my own community to not have the same experience that I had, and to really take ownership. And sorry, I'm talking quite a lot, but there was something where I went through my diagnosis, started to go through my diagnosis, and I had a manager that basically sat down, did a half an hour of Google the night before and said, you are this. I don't know if it's your ADHD, or I don't know if it's just who you are. So for me, I had to wear my labels because I thought either you're going to own the narrative of who I am, or I can own it. So for me, it was really about, again, it was that restorative justice. It was about the liberation of me saying, before you say I'm all these things, I'm going to tell you exactly who I am. So I really just wanted to own it. It's me. You're on mute, Arthur.
Sorry, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, the depth there, it speaks to the question of power, you know, how we are able to navigate power or powerlessness, but also reclaim it for ourselves before other people do, you know. I'm going to touch on this a bit more as well, but I would like to just hear more from Parvin and Eva on this as well. So I'm going to ask very sort of briefly with the timings of things, so we get through them. What are the benefits and limitations of the labels we wear in your mind, and what approaches can be or should be adopted to build connections and solidarity?
Is that for me, bro?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Right. I think Hannah really touched upon a lot of things that I was going to say, which is good. But I think the system that we are operating in needs to be understood. So as some people said, we are an imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, casteist, cis, heteronormative, ableist patriarchy. So whoever doesn't fit in these definitions do need labels, because that explains why we don't agree with the system. So yeah, like, I mean, I think if you look at how the society is organized and where people who are divergent from these struggle is to begin with our schools, right? Like, I mean, where we initially start thinking, actually, like, I mean, why are some of the kids not doing what we are asking them to do? But before we get to that point, we need to understand why we are holding little people in a classroom between 9 to 3:30, expecting them to be obedient, because I think the schooling as we know currently is to create employees for the future who are obedient and don't question power and work in those. So I think it kind of is pathologization in a way sometimes, where if you're not accepting with as things are given to you, you you you're not normal. You have to be something different. Otherwise, why are you not agreeing with what everyone else is agreeing? But I think one fascinating thing is that neurodivergence is normal in like uh, animal life in a way. Like even if you look at a group of ants, there'll always be certain ants which are going at which are not following the pattern of the where the ants are going and just divert. And it is important for them to do it that way because they are the ants which lead them to new resources of food and keeps them going. It is a bit risk taking in a way. They might not survive, but I think it is needed in a way. So I think I think I do agree that we should be accepting of people who don't fit the narrative, and sometimes labels do help. But as I have alluded in the past, that the if those labels are not explained in a way in the context it is being used, it can be a bit doesn't serve the purpose. So say for example, like I'll give a couple of examples. This is going to be interesting. So I told my dad, as Eva said, explaining to my dad, saying that I have ADHD, and because my dad is not a native speaker of English, I did try to do it through my brother, and I think it got lost in Chinese whispers, and he thought that I was losing my memory. He thought I had dementia in a way. He's like, "Have you started losing your memory?" And I was like, "Dad, that's not the way. It is this. Like, I do lose my keys sometimes, and that is because of this thing I have, which I don't have control of." He's like, those things don't exist in our world. I was like, that's you actually. So yeah. And also, like, my sister-in-law who's here in the UK, tried to explain it to her mom, saying that I have ADHD, and her response was like, I have LMNOPQ. So why are you making it about yourself? So yeah, I think the question is about Eurocentricity, right? Like even in terms of someone asked saying, what do you mean by Eurocentricity? Is that I think it also falls to people like us to actually explain neurodiversity in other contexts, in languages that that are not just English. And I think it is for us to take that mantle as well. And in terms of how do we build connections and solidarity within the neurodiversity community, is that I think all the conversations which are about neurodiversity at work should also be about the neurodivergent people who are not at work. If we are not doing that, we are just wanting to be part of that democracy where we just want representation at the table where decisions are being made. Yes, of course, a couple of us might get to be at the table, but most of us will still suffer. So I think our solidarity should be with the people who are most affected by the system. And I think by doing that, we will have solidarity with the whole movement. And I think also I did touch upon it, that we should look at workplaces and also the systems which does make it hard for a lot of other marginalized people. So if you think of neurodivergence and ways of working, you can understand there is similarities on why flexible working works for neurodivergent people, and also women, and also people who have caring responsibilities. So I think solidarity between a lot of other social movements is needed, because we are the majority, and for us work doesn't work. It only benefits a certain number of people, and they'll try and put us into different lines, because that's where the work, isn't it? To say that, hey, oh, let's focus on what you need as neurodivergent people. But I think if we start looking at erasing those boundaries and just understanding systematically, socially, what are the problems involved, then I think we'll find solutions that will work for most of us.
Thank you. You touched on some good things there as well that speak to me as well. My father also, my father's still with us. He is dyslexic and awesome with it, capable of drawing and making things and just do things with his hand, but not a strong reader. doesn't spell right particularly, and was tortured as a child. In many ways, emotionally, mentally. I'm sad to say that, but it's an intergenerational struggle, you know, that these attitudes, hopefully they're not linear. That would be presumptuous, but they definitely do come with taboos. My father, he worked on a factory line at Ford, and he was very good at what he did, particularly in terms of quality controlling, and having an eye to make sure. But when they looked to promote him, he would turn down promotions. He was very afraid that they would see that he doesn't write. Now, a person working on a factory line where they've 4 children to feed is a struggle. So who wouldn't turn down promotion to be paid? Yeah, somebody who's already masking, somebody who's already holding on, somebody who's desperate to make sure, look, I have something in my hand. It's not much, but as migrants, we take what we can in the spaces we can. And we don't want to lose that. And what if they see this? Now, these sort of self-limiting beliefs are in every one of us, and I suspect in every single person amongst the 1.3 thousand people listening today. And sometimes we mask in the workplace, but actually we also mask in our community. There are some people who will not mask in the workplace. They found a liberating voice in the workplace, perhaps if they're lucky and fortunate and really connect to that. But maybe masking at home. That's the power of shame, right? You know, and it's the power of how we are forced often to lead these double-edged lives. If I'm going to ask the same question to you, I'm just going to plant the same seed. I'm thinking a lot about power. Look, I don't have a diagnosis of ADHD. You spend enough time with me and it's fairly certain it's there. But I don't want another disorder narrative on my label. But the bigger thing isn't just that. The bigger thing is, I think ADHD is still a cultural concept. We have created a culture. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What really means is that barriers exist. Sense of belonging exists, the way we navigate the world in our different cultures and communities and voices, the way we were welcomed for thinking fast, to shepherd cattle and children, and to think about the way the wind blows and think about multiple things, and we were on the move, and we were nomads. And suddenly we've got to be in one place and think about one thing and be decided upon how we do that as children, to do one thing, keep still. Our beautiful hunters and gatherers became technocrats and farmers and told only to be that. And with it came the shame. And so, but I'm also somebody who doesn't necessarily risk much right now in my life. My childhood, yes. But right now, if I choose not to get a diagnosis for ADHD formally, there's not a ramification for that in my life right now. I got to be part of a community and created a company that I needed when I was younger. It's a wonderful community. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful thing that reaches people around the world. So no one will look at me to say, hey, if Atif doesn't formally have an ADHD diagnosis, then he's not allowed to the party. That doesn't happen in this organization, but it doesn't happen in my life. So I wonder, do I want this diagnosis? No. What would it tell me? I'm not sure. It's still a cultural concept built upon a medical model and a deficit model at best. But do I need healing? Yes. How do I get that? I'm getting that now. I'm getting that with you guys. Yeah. So, but it's going back to those things about parents and how they feel as well. But if I want to ask the same question, because I'm sort of touching on that as well, are there benefits and limitations to the labels we wear, and what approaches in terms of solidarity for the community?
Yeah. I mean, if someone's mentioned in the chat, a label, a diagnosis is almost proof that we're not crazy. That in itself is a hugely liberating experience. I mean, a lot of what I wanted to say about this, Hannah and Praveen have brilliantly articulated. But I want to caveat that with the labels are a starting point. And I think, you know, leaning into one of the questions about a diagnosis doesn't define us, it doesn't. It's a starting point, and I think we all need to be careful, whether it's neurodiversity or any other condition. We've got to be careful that the label doesn't define us. We treat it as a starting point. We use it as the next chapter from there on, we start looking for the support, we look for the answers. And yes, you know, for those, for example, who have ADHD, who need medication, it's access to medication for them as well, because without that diagnosis, they just simply wouldn't have that access. But we need to look at who gets access. And I think when we look at the benefits and limitations of a diagnosis of a label, only certain people are, well, I'll say it, only certain people are allowed it. And that's, you know, there's a lot of heavy gatekeeping, a lot of control, because when we look at society, society was created to be neat, to be structured, to be ordered, to serve the needs of those who were in power, and that's how it's always been, and we are expected to fall in line with that. But as the years, decades have gone on, that hasn't ever been challenged at all. And sometimes, you know, going back to the quote you said, Atif, you know, where the heart has nowhere to go. Sometimes when we really don't have any sense of belonging, we don't have any sort of community, we seek that label as a key to gain access to a community. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that even within, for example, the neurodiverse community, there is a lot of gatekeeping as well. You know, if you don't have that label, you don't have that diagnosis, you can't sit with us. And where does that leave you? It leaves you longing a label even more. It leads you down the wrong path to what a label actually stands for. So as a community, we need to be a lot more empathetic. We need to really come together. We need to challenge and to, I wouldn't say rebuild society, but to evolve society, because society is too rigid for people like us. It serves those who it just happens to serve. The rest of us, how do we fit in? We're expected to fall in line. So we need to create a new standard within society, and that standard is there isn't one. You know, that no one is treated any differently because, you know, because their sexuality isn't the default, because their neurodiversity isn't the default, because of their disability. Nothing like that. We need to come together and we need to push for this as a community. But it shouldn't just be us to ask questions of society, to say, hey, give us a seat at the table. We need neurotypicals, allies to our communities, to really say, we have a privilege here. How do we extend this privilege and open the doors to other people? Because unless we work together and people see us, people hear us and our experiences, we will always be left behind. We will always be bottom rung of the ladder, especially if we're not white. And for me personally, a label will go a long way towards giving me a starting point towards support, because for so many years, whenever I struggled, I would have complete meltdowns, and I would never understand what that meltdown came from. It was just this intense feeling inside, and that led to a lot of self-harm. That led to a lot of destructive behaviors. It led to a lot of suicidal attempts when things got worse, because I couldn't deal with it. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to comprehend these feelings inside over certain situations, made more frustrating by the fact that other people seem to trivialize it. But when I was, you know, taken to A&E, or when I was escorted to the mental health unit, you know, by an ambulance and a police unit, I was just seen as depressed. I was seen as suicidal because I was just a bit depressed. There was nothing about the cause, the triggers, the feelings behind it. And I think we're too quick to say it's X, Y, Z. You go to a doctor now and you say, you know, these are the feelings, and I'll lose my appetite, I'm not feeling great, you're just a bit depressed, take these antidepressants, away you go. We need a lot less of that. We need a lot more understanding. We need empathy. We need to get to the bottom of why an individual feels the way that they do, rather than measuring them against this societal template of this is the ideal. we need to be looking at it and thinking, what's this person saying? What are they feeling? And that is an approach that we need to adopt across all cultures, across all of society, because otherwise people will get left behind. People will be overlooked. People will be diagnosed with something else and not treated or given the support that they need. And yeah, it's a really difficult one, because when we look at unity at such a level, where do we even start? But it starts with webinars such as this. It starts with people coming together, hearing and listening to each other, and going away with little ideas, little seeds of change for those people to then go back out into their communities and think, this is something that inspired me. This is something that I heard. I need to share this.
Eva, thank you so much, particularly with the depth of that sharing. It's not given lightly. And thank you. So it speaks so much to the heart of what's going on, that people's lives are at risk often in these conversations, you know, that the stigma is overwhelming. And the stigma may exist, as has been touched on, within the community if neurodiversity is a community, which I would argue, and I'm fascinated by these conversations, is neurodiversity a community in itself? I strongly am excited by the depth of those conversations, but I would be hard pushed to really believe there is a homogenous identity to that. I think touching on a lot of what's been said, there are, and I think we're in that space now, those who are dangerously close to being the good autistic because they are gifted and superpower narratives live within that social capital, perhaps in that person's identity, or the grasping of a superpower just lets you feel like you're a human being because so much has done wrong and been done wrong to you. And that request, and it's a quiet one, just ask for everyday belonging. Sometimes it whimpers it out, but it's just a simple ask. Not to be a super divergent, neurodivergent, superpower, anything, just everyday belonging. This is an act of solidarity. And it's costing us lives because we're dependent on pathologizing it in order to be legitimized. It's costing us lives because so much of the narrative isn't safe for some people. And that includes white working class communities who can reinforce or not have the familiarity or the confidence to talk about these conversations because the advocacy in their lives hasn't been there. This, of course, speaks to people with Black communities who also have to transcend social economic realities that says it's just really hard to know who do you meet who can advocate for you and how, when you're dealing with structural racism, you're already dealing with stuff, you know? And, you know, frankly, if you're dealing with stuff, I'm going to talk about workplace because I think the conversation needs to go there, but that if you have to do more in a workplace, then you're hardwired to share less, you know? And if the folks in the C-suite are talking about gifted superpowers and autism, but actually, you know, they don't look like you. Or there's an ERG or neurodiversity, but they're coming from white middle class spaces. That's okay. There's nothing wrong because it's certainly not their fault. But they are folks who have had advocacy in their lives, maybe hopefully parental ones with love. But as I told you, my father can't say, hey, my son is gifted. He's just worried. He's just worried that I deal with the same life he has. The last thing he wants me to do is talk about it in a workplace. In fact, it baffles him that I do, even though I'm the CEO. You know, it still baffles him that I talk about it in a workplace. And that's okay, because that's part of that journey. But the everyday belonging says the ERG or neurodiversity in the workplace is made up of all of us. It's not just certain people who can advocate because they've got a label. Because those who are not safe with a label will stand on the periphery. And we will watch from the outside. And we will hope that familiarity arrives. Sometimes we won't realize that it's our job to be that familiarity. And nor should we expect the emotional labor to be on us to be that. So it's something to think about. Right, so I'm going to move us into some of the questions that are coming up as well. There's some great questions, really, and I'm not, you know, the depth of this has been so real. I'm sort of a provocation to the audience, and I would like, you know, I'm not going to ask our panel to answer this. I'm just provocation to the audience. That education itself is about participation, but is that participation about acquiescing to systems and being good performers, you know, and good students? So we reinforce power structures and stay within that, conform it, and teachers themselves are servants of reinforcing that power structure? Or is it an act of liberation that says we are going to transform our environment? We're going to transform our set of choices, and we're going to win at doing that. We're going to master the game, even the game we didn't create, and we're going to master it to transform our environment and our choices for each other, even if we didn't create the game. There is not a single border of Africa that was made by an African today. There is not a single border in the Middle East that's made from an Arab, and there is not a border of India made by an Indian. We don't decide our nations, our countries. We certainly didn't decide the rules of the education systems within it. To be human in the legacies of 400 years of oppression is to be educated. But it's not to be educated on our terms or to be understood on our terms, but it's to be educated on the terms of colonial legacies and colonial oppression. So today we are fighting to be welcomed into the golf club that said we can't come in. And we're desperately fighting, please let us in. And then the golf club changes its rules. It says, okay, if you've got this marker, this bit, this label, this thing, you can come in. And so we're fighting today, saying, thank you. I've got this piece of paper, here it is. Can I come in? The strength of everyday belonging is going to be when we're in a space where we say, we don't need to burn your golf club down, nor are we trying to, nor do we want to. But we have enough self-esteem in ourselves and the differences we come up to know that our people globally have built neurodiverse welcomes to children long before it was decided what education was, that the Maasai people did it, the Tuareg people did it, that they validated children's experiences and differences through just innovation and kindness and love, that we didn't decide the sense of worth of a child just based on how they read or write or speak or acquiesce English language. And we didn't use disorder narratives in order for them to be part of the tribe. We just welcomed and we understood that there were differences. So I want to park on that a little bit because I think that does speak to what is it to be neurodiverse and useful? How do we find a space to say, we believe we're useful, but we're fighting to say that we are? And perhaps that speaks to the consciousness of capitalism and you know, and capitalism, it doesn't, well, I mean, maybe that's a conversation for another day, but is neurodiversity entering a space where capitalism is co-opting the narrative on it? Or is it entered a space where it's just being understood better in the workplace and it's a good thing? Is there a space where we are at crossroads, perhaps, where a very tragic mishap will happen when people mask more and more because the rules in which neurodiversity is described will be predetermined under a capitalist agenda? Or are we going to be part of the generation that transforms the conversation into a liberated space that says it's okay for us to show up differently? You're going to love us anyway. I want to throw that out to anybody that wants to try and take that question on out of the three of you.
You're absolutely right. And for me, I think creating that space, totally agree with the education system. I had, for me, it was kind of entering the space or kind of seeing the way the space showed up for me. I kind of went, actually, this isn't somewhere I belong and I don't even want to be here. I don't want to be in that space. So I think we need to have a conversation about what does that lead to? Because then that leads to me saying, okay, I'll just be isolated. I'll just self-care for myself. The concept of self-care, you know, when you're down and out and you're at your lowest, you need community care, right? You need your community to come and pick you up because sometimes you can't even get up off the floor. So how am I going to self-care? What does that even look like? I don't even know what it is. And I think I had a moment in, I don't know if people know, but there was a lack of kind of distribution of ADHD medication. So every month it was a real battle to get my medication. And I could see kind of on LinkedIn and stuff like people, it was the biggest thing in their lives. Everyone was kind of, you know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But I was dealing with a genocide. So I got to a point where, you know, I just ran out my medication, I hadn't even thought about it. And then that battle was kind of a side of my desk battle, because I was dealing with people that I cared about, people, friends, loved ones, and just my community going through a genocide. And I think that was the moment for me where I just realized, if this is my community, then why haven't they shown up for me? You know, I mean, why have they not shown up for me? And then who's afforded the care in the space? Like, I try and show up for everyone, but understanding that actually there was, so I think for me, it's just really understanding that we all, and being okay with the fact that we all come from a place where our minds have been colonized as well, right? And once we can accept that, we can start doing the work. You know, during COVID, I knew that I had financial privilege, so I showed up for my community, whether it be food parcels and all this, like whatever we could do, you show up. So I think for me, and I create my CIC that we've just created, is because part of my identity has been dehumanized so badly that actually, well, even if I do come to you, are you going to invite me in? So for me, I think it's about really seeing everyone, right, for their entirety, and being like, okay, how do we make this better? Not, you know, okay, you're neurodiversity, but you're also dealing with this. So, hey, should I try and get some meds for you? Like, what does that look like? Because that is the stuff that matters. So that's kind of where my head was at, in terms of, you know, who are we seeing in this space in the first place, and are we seeing all of me? Like, you seeing all of me, you seeing everything that comes up, and how are we showing up? But because I think what we've done now in the CIC that we've built, it's about empowerment of our own community as well. It's about creating an ecosystem and the space where people can belong, regardless of who they are. But we educate at the same time, right? We've got to educate, we've got to break down barriers. So I think it's having both.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Thoughts on capitalism and
Yeah.
agency?
Sure. Yeah. So capitalism wants us to find individual solutions to systemic problems and wants us to work separately. So yeah. So if systems are not working for 20% of the people, they want to work on individual adjustments rather than trying to understand what's wrong with the system. And they also want to, as Hannah was saying, we are told that we need to self-care, we need to isolate, and we need to rejuvenate and come back into the system to contribute to the system, because we can give you adjustments. But I think, as Hannah was saying, we need to educate, we need to organize, and we need to agitate to get our rights. And I think historically, some cultures have shown that community care, when community is there for everyone, you don't need to isolate some people to say, hey, you don't fit the system, we'll give you some adjustments. So that's needed. And I think I also feel like sometimes the decolonization narrative is taken to bring some problematic aspects of certain cultures and say that, oh, this is a solution, right? Like, I mean, I'm Indian, so I do have a problem when people say, hey, do some yoga, do some meditation, without understanding how yoga was deeply enrooted in the casteist system, where people at the top of the system, who made the rules, as Emma said, made it so easy for themselves that they could have the capacity to like, or the bandwidth to actually think about salvation, think about meditation. I don't think any of my ancestors have done any yoga. I could talk about a large majority of people who are from oppressed castes in India, and we were not afforded education. I'm the first person in my family to be a university graduate, let alone move out of India. So I think there as well you need to look at cultures which have been like advocating for their rights. So if you look at the indigenous people in India who are now organizing against these companies which are coming to take their resources and like natural resources, are talking about Jal Jungle Jameen, which means water, forest, and my land. So this is how we are all need to live in a way. Like look at those examples, and I think capitalism will, when you ask for, hey, I want forest, they'll give you like a playlist to listen to forest sounds rather than giving you the access to give you land rights. So yeah, I think educate, organize, agitate, and we need to find uh, move away from individual solutions
And liberate, Praveen. I think liberate as well, educate and liberate, right?
Absolutely. I'm gonna hand to Eva as well, but I just say, yeah, I often watch some movies. There's some films I watch. If you remember watching Avatar, the movie with the blue people, and sometimes you watch capitalism, watching this amazing film about people resisting and fighting back the colonial struggles and even intergalactic colonial legacies, and people will pay and really root for the underdog, and yet you only have to watch the news to say, will you pay for it and root for the underdog when it's real, when it's happening around you? You know, you don't have to go to Pandora to see Palestine. You know, you don't have to go to places, and it's not just Palestine. It's all there are 5,000 nations who are stateless as people. The terms in which they look at neurodiversity, we could lean into. We could look to see what is the joy in the way your folks have interpreted autism, and what credence as custodians of that could we look at to hear and really love and nurture ourselves through. But instead we're saying you need to be more like us, and if you're more like us, we'll decide how human and how deserved your liberation truly is. But instead we'll use words like peace, because who doesn't love peace? It's a good word, but it's mostly, I think, often used in terms of submission. And liberation is something else. It says we cannot get to a good place unless you're in a good place. And so we're not here to do paternalism and saving people. We're here to recognize that all our liberations are deeply connected and interconnected, and always have been. We just haven't done a good job of making that everyday belonging in the workplace or outside of it a part of that liberation. So Eva, I'm going to ask to you, and then I'm going to sort of wrap up a little bit if I can, best I can. But Eva, so same thoughts for you. If you have any, and it's okay to say no. But in terms of, can we acquiesce to a capitalist agenda that makes us more useful and prove that we're useful, or can we walk past that golf club and say it's okay? It's okay that you're there, but it's okay we're here. We're going to walk past, and we're going to create our thing. You know?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I mean, Avatar. I remember watching that and thinking, this is basically the film Dances with Wolves, but with blue people.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, in itself, capitalism, but let's not even go into the film industry. I mean, first of all, to Hannah's point about being seen, that is so important, isn't it? You know, being seen outside the golf club, being seen in the golf club, being seen to walk past the golf club and saying, I don't want to go there. I don't need to be over there because I need to be over there with my people instead. And it makes me think, for example, if you know, the ADHD meds shortage, and indeed with a lot of medication shortages such as HRT during the pandemic as well, if those meds were needed by white cishet men, there would never be a shortage. Simple as that. So we need to explore that. And when we look at community, we look at being seen. Who's being seen? Who's being catered for? And it segues nicely into a question I spotted in the Q&A about a TV show, Love on the Spectrum, which, if you're not from the UK, is about, it's like a fly on the wall documentary style series about people on the spectrum finding love, discussing relationships and things like that. And I have a love-hate relationship with the media. I've done lots of documentaries. I've had documentaries made about me, my wife, my transition. And I've learned a lot about the mainstream media because of it. And I start to see this now in other areas, within other communities, where a producer will approach you, whether like I've been approached through my agency or directly, where they want to tell your story. But are they? Are they really putting the budget together to tell my story? Or are they using me as a guinea pig, as the face for their story? And when we look at the mainstream media, you know, the people become poster childs for various campaigns, various narratives very easily. Love on the Spectrum, I understand where they want to go with it, but at the end of the day, it's almost like it's a faux narrative. The media sensationalizes for its own gain. The media needs entertainment, it needs a hook, it needs views, it needs the ad revenue. And it uses people like us who do struggle, and it claims to highlight our struggle, but it's not highlighting it in a way that is beneficial to us. It's highlighting these things that are in a way that's beneficial to them. We become entertainment. And when we need to be seen, we need to band together, because I've seen documentaries made within the neurodiverse community. I've seen documentaries being made within the trans community, within the disability community, and they are accurate. They are heartbreaking. Those are the narratives, those are the documentaries that need to be out there for people to understand. But right now, we're barely scratching the surface. And to be seen, we need those stories, the true stories out there, told in a way that is liberating and will lead to further liberation.
Absolutely. Eva, thank you. Thank
And I
you.
think, just to add to that, I think before we can even get to the stories, the environment and the conditions need to be right for people to be able to tell that story safely, or even feel they can. So I think it's going to be absolutely right. But have we even got the environment where people can tell their story safely?
Yeah, and I'm going to echo that. I've come to the end here. I'm going to echo that point that I said earlier, that shame dies when we find a safe place to tell a story. And if we can't find one, then perhaps in an act of solidarity to ourselves and each other, that we find a way of creating one. Maybe it's not in the workplace for some people, you know, and that's okay. It's okay. Maybe it's amongst kinship and values. And maybe some of those values, they transcend color. Maybe they transcend class too. Maybe they transcend communities. But it's just a feeling of outrage and a feeling of warmth, knowing when you feel welcomed and seen, not because of labels, but because of the deservedness of that, you know? So there's lots to be said there, but there is something to be said, and we've run out of time really, about the idea that some communities are legitimized and welcomed than others. Some communities find out about these conversations through harrowing pain, often at loss of life or attempted loss of life, and often in case of psychological trauma and prisons, all of which cannot be separated from each other. So we do have work to be doing. We do need to do work in our own communities. We have work to understand that the workplace cannot just reinforce the good dyslexic or the talented autistic, but rather that talent and trauma lives in the heart of the best of us. It lives in the heart of the 1,500 people listening today. It lives in this panel today. But talent and trauma, that we are this good through these differences. And we're this great because we found spaces, or we've created them, to share these differences. So more will get left behind, but not as long as we keep sharing these differences and raising the conversation in and outside of the workplace, and to the very lives that make us feel safe, wherever that is. So I'm just going to stop really and say thank you to everyone, and thank you to Team Lexic for hosting this space, for inviting me to have this space with you. I know for a lot of people this will be new, and you'd like to see more. So do look at Labels and Legacies of the podcast as well as the work that Parveen and Eva and Hannah do separately. It's courageous work, and I don't say that lightly. It takes real guts to be able to look at your own childhood, examine the isolation that it's made you feel at times, and publicly say, I still matter, you know. And it's a gift to all of us when people do that every single time. When a person refuses to place more, it invites me to go big and feel welcomed every time. So I'm going to stop there. It's 11 o'clock. Please do stay in touch, and really get excited by these conversations. I hope all of your Neurodiversity Celebration Week this week are doing precisely that, celebrating that week and making that celebration an act of solidarity and liberation for others who wouldn't necessarily feel safe in the week that we're having here. So thank you from me. I'm Atif Chowdhury and Hannah Lit and Eva Echo and Fabian Kulgari. Thank you very much, all of you. I'm going to stop there.